thechairshot.com. Always use your head.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Badlands Podcast, the only podcast out there that is 100% chiseled and is proudly part of the Chairshot Media Group. I am Mags, and I am flying solo today. Paul is a little bit indisposed, but he doesn't get the opportunity to speak to one of our favourite people on wrestling Twitter. Been way too long since this person has been on the show. I mean, she was on the show back when we were still in Brainbuster mode, which is a hell of a long time. Yeah, everybody remembers how that went down. But yeah, I am so glad that we've reconnected. Someone who kind of has gone kind of missing in wrestling Twitter. Now, do you know what? I've really missed her, so I'm glad she's back. Today, it's the absolutely amazing Ori. Ori, how are you, Mom?
Hello, darling. I'm good. I'm just being mom, being wife, working here and there, and trying to get a Twitch stream. I've been doing the TikTok thing. I don't know why. It's so random. Like, I'm not a cosplayer by any stretch of the imagination. My lip syncing is so, and I rant about things like I do every once in a while. But it's fun. It's goofy, silly fun, and that's what I'm here for, you know? I'm always good for a fun, goofy laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like I said, and it's not me blowing smoke up your ass or anything like that. I really have missed you. We've had some really good conversations. You're someone who I've always appreciated and kind of respected their view on wrestling. And I'm glad that we're getting this opportunity to reconnect and just have a chat about the world of pro wrestling. So, what have you been up to? Where have you been? How has your life with wrestling gone?
It's been up and down the last year. And I think that's, you know, for a lot of fans, especially female fans over the last year, like that's not an uncommon situation. When everything started to come out, the information, there were people that I had interactions with that I had to completely second guess. There were people that I had interactions with or that I had wanted to have interactions with that, you know, my trust both as a female and as a fan had to be second guessed. And I feel like that's probably really familiar for a lot of people just in general, whether you're male, female, you know, non-binary, transgender, wherever you fall on the multitude of the spectrum, you know, you kind of rethink everything that you thought before, whether it's how you view this person, how you viewed an interaction, whether it was in person, on Twitter, at a show, you know, I think in a lot of ways, it left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth, as it should. The information absolutely should have come out, and it should have happened a long time ago. But I think for those who have, you know, gone on, done the right thing, attempted to make amends, those that didn't have information come out about them, you know, and were just reaffirmed as being good people, I think it helped restored a lot of faith in wrestling as a whole. And I don't think we're there yet by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's still maybe not more to come out of it, but I think we're starting to get on the road to healing and having fans trust wrestlers and companies, that things aren't just going to be, you know, slid under the ring apron, so to speak, or what have you. But I think we're getting there. And I think, you know, the people who deserve to be at the top, who got there the right way, are finally getting the pushes that they deserve. And, you know, I think it's, you know, it was a sucky situation overall. You know, you can't deny that. But I think some good is gonna come out of it on the other side, you know.
Absolutely, and I will not ever begrudge anybody who feels that what happened over the last 18 months has really turned them off wrestling. I would totally understand. Like I mentioned to you pre-recording, there was a tweet by Tom Collins who said that there's no ethical way you can be a fan of wrestling. And I have to agree, I've been a lifelong fan of wrestling. There was a period when I was checked out, but I always kept up to date with what was happening. But with all the stories that have come out and all the abuse, I can totally understand why people don't want any involvement in this. It absolutely makes sense, and I would not begrudge people. And I also like the way you're positive about that. This could be kind of a good thing for wrestling, that we're weeding out these very unsavoury people. And I still think we've gone a long way to go. I mean, I spoke to you a few minutes ago. People are still being outed. We're going to see that for a while. But what we're seeing is a profession that is willing to out these people rather than sweep it under the carpet. These kind of like kayfabe story, what happens in wrestling stays in wrestling, and kind of like it's the bro code. Hopefully we're getting to the point where that is gone. We don't, it's not acceptable anymore, and these people who have these histories and these past of abuse are going to be weeded out, whether it happens now, whether it happens in a few years down the line. You are going to be outed. So yeah, it can only be good for wrestling that we get rid of this horrific deadwood.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I was one of these people, you know, I told you before we started recording, I haven't really watched much in the last 12 to 18 months. I mean, you know, I've watched a very, very little bit of WWE, and most of that was for Edge, to be perfectly honest, because I started watching wrestling 20 years ago when the Hardys and the Dudleys and Edge and Christian, they were in Lita and Team Extreme and all that, you know, I was 100% all in on that, to steal a phrase from AEW. And, you know, to invest that much energy into something and have that information come out, you know, it was a physical and emotional drain. And so I just kind of had to step back. I've even, you know, as much as I love being the elite in AEW, I kind of had to step back from that as well. And I haven't really watched, you know, I did watch AEW Revolution last night, but I've got most of the weekly stuff just sitting on the DVR. You know, I haven't watched BTE in probably 6 months, and I loved that. And, you know, was always wanting for it to be longer. Like, these shows are not long enough. And so, but, you know, and I'll get caught up. I think last night, the show that we watched really helped kind of reignite that a little bit. And especially with some of the women's wrestling that we saw last night, I thought it was really, really good. And, you know, who knows? I might be swinging around wrestling Twitter a little more often.
Well, I would be so glad if that happened. And it's almost apropos that the topic we've got leads into the show that we had last night, and that was an absolute happy accident. So yeah, like Ori said, for context, we are recording the day after Revolution 2021 and the exploding barbed wire match that Kenny and Moxley had. And the topic we're covering is the Mount Rushmore of hardcore wrestlers, and just researching my picks and watching so many kind of different iterations of these barbed wire exploding matches. Yeah, it was interesting to have that context between the old school kind of Japanese almost led hardcore deathmatch scene and what we got last night. So it'll be fun to kind of compare and contrast, I think.
I think so too. I mean, you know, I know a lot of people are going to give AEW and Kenny and the whole company a lot of crap about what happened last night, especially I won't say the finish, but the ending after the finish. They're going to give them a lot of crap, but we'll see how well this ages. So check back with me after this comes out. But I think I know how they can spin this. Like Tony's already started kind of spinning it, saying, "Oh well, he's a wrestler. He's not a carpenter. He's not an electrician or that. You know, what do you expect from Kenny Omega?"
He drew his plans in crayon. That was
exactly. And I think we're going to get a little bit of troll Kenny. Like, really, you expected, you know, what did you expect from me? I'm not going to put myself in harm's way and potentially have myself blown up. Are you crazy? So I think we're going to get some of that kind of heel cleaner troll Kenny from it. And I love Kenny so much, you know that. And so I think if anybody can spin this positively and make it work, it's Kenny. That being said, there's other things they could have done at the end of the match when that happened to kind of help things and make things better. But overall, like I'll in the moment, I was like, what the frack? What the frack did I just watch? And this morning with some clarity and a full night's sleep and stuff, I'm like, all right. We can spin this. Like, all of a sudden, I turned into Vince McMahon. We can spin this.
I mean, for being totally honest, I really enjoyed the match. I thought I was never expecting it to be like the matches I've been watching to research this topic, because it's a Western audience. There's it's a younger demographic in terms of fans. So I didn't really kind of hold it up against these classics in terms of death matches. But for what it was a really intense, enjoyable match. The finish, it's probably going to go down in history as a Botchamania special. But it was funny though. The thing was, it was so over the top that you can't help but laugh at what happened. I mean, we had the sparklers off the posts. We had the little plumes of smoke. We had the overacting commentary. I mean, Tony Schiavone, what a legend he is. I absolutely love the guy. But when he was saying that they could feel the heat from the explosions at the commentary table, I'm like, really, Tony? Really? That is over.
And then the cell from Kingston.
That, and I was just going to get onto that. That was...
They could have seriously, like, once they saw how it came out, like, they could have had a ref run out there and been like, Eddie, it's over. It's done. And have him get up like, what the heck was that? Seriously? You wimp. Well, I'm not going to say that. Come on. But if they twist this right, I think they can break this down to becoming a Kenny Kingston feud. You know, an Omega Kingston feud. And that could, I mean, that's a matchup we haven't seen yet. That's fresh blood in the water, so to speak. So, you know, again, check with me when this comes out. You know, we'll see how well did that post age. Yeah. So,
I mean, it's probably likely that Mox is taking some time away anyway, obviously with Renee being pregnant and just he's been in the main title pictures ever since he landed in AEW. So it's kind of one of those scenes where if they go away, how can they be missed if they're always there, kind of thing. But his storyline with Eddie has been superb. That kind of like best friends, worst enemies thing. The way that Eddie come down to protect him, chef's kiss. It was beautiful. Oh, yeah. Really good storytelling. I want Eddie to cut a promo this week on Dynamite, absolutely selling the fact that he nearly died to protect Moxley. I want him to go full into it. No kayfabe. Just go full into this like. It was terrifying. He needed the defibs. He needed CPR. I want him to just sell the hell out of it. Just because
smelling salts.
Because you might as well. You might. Everybody knows it went down not as they planned. Just run with it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if there's somebody who can do that, Eddie is the person to do that.
Yeah, and I have to admit, as someone who has been primarily out of the wrestling scene for 6, 8, 10 months, and to catch this pay-per-view mainly just for, the Moxley Omega match, like, I'm invested in this. I want to see how they play this off. This is kind of reignited things a little bit for me. So it's like now I've got all these, I work like 4 hours on Friday and a full day on Saturday. I have a full freaking week, to do nothing but sit back and throw it on while I clean house for I don't know how many at the time. So, I've got like 2 or 3 months worth of dynamites to catch up on, not to mention BTE at some freaking point, if I can remember where I left off. So, I did catch the Brody Lee special. I will say that. I did catch that. That was one that I couldn't miss. I had to, that was rough. Anyway.
So, we've mentioned the topic. Let's get into it then. So we decided let's talk about the very best of hardcore wrestlers. So who is first on your list of hardcore wrestlers?
I got to go Tommy Dreamer.
Interesting.
I got to start with Tommy Dreamer. Well, I don't have to start with Tommy Dreamer, but
you want to.
But I do. I really do. There's something about Tommy Dreamer, not only as a wrestler, but as a person that, you see him do the stuff that he does and it's just, oh my God. And then he's just like the nicest guy. So unless you really knew him from that world, he just seems very guy next door, super nice, let you borrow a cup of sugar. And I'm sure he really is like that too. So, but he just, man, he's done some stuff that you just look at and you're like, how are you still alive? Of course, I think that could be, that phrase could probably be thrown out for anybody we put on this list.
Yeah.
So, but there's just something so fun and relatable about Tommy Dreamer as a person that makes him so...
Right now, savings goals might feel out of reach, but with the U.S. Bank mobile app, we can help you put money aside in a way that won't make you miss it. Using personalized insights, you can save in a way that works in real life and all the curveballs that come with it. So let's get you closer to whatever it is you're saving for. Because at U.S. Bank, even our tools are smart enough to put people first. U.S. Bank. We'll get there together. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Enigmatic and charismatic to watch. He's just so much good darn fun.
Yeah, it's a great pick, and it's not someone who I picked. I did have him on my kind of short list, but for me, he epitomized Western hardcore wrestling. He was the face of ECW.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was there from the moment the company opened to he was the guy who turned the lights off at the end. Really kind of gave his body for wrestling. And you can't not appreciate that. It's an outstanding pick, and I cannot fault it at all. I've gone a slightly different route with mine. I've gone for people who I didn't really know about. I mean, I was never a huge hardcore kind of deathmatch fan. I got into ECW kind of at the death of it almost. I think the first actual ECW DVD I bought was Guilty as Charged 2001, which was the last pay-per-view that they put on. So I really kind of, being in Britain, it was really difficult to get all of at the time. But I've gone back and watched a lot of the stuff, and it does appeal to me, but I was never into the hardcore kind of deathmatch style. But going back and researching this, oh, Jesus Christ, I've seen some things. I've seen some real things. So
let me, because I can admit I was the same way. Like when I was younger, oh no, I'm not going to watch that. There's so much blood. Oh my God, it's so brutal. And now you're like, yeah. Like, I don't know what it is like as I get older, but like the spectacle of the death match. And I think there's also there's something to be said that comes with age that, as you're becoming deeper and deeper as a fan of wrestling, you start to realize the psychology, and you realize, since we had shows like Tough Enough and whatnot, you see what they have to go through just to train their bodies for regular wrestling. So, when they do these hardcore or death matches, there's not only the regular physics of wrestling, but there's other extra precautions that they need to take. They still need to fall a certain way to minimize damage. And so I think it makes you appreciate what they go through as performers even more. Like I'd always heard, and I'm sure I may have told you this, I may have told someone else, but I'd always heard, when there's two wrestlers in the ring, no matter what kind of match it is, they're telling a story. Mm-hmm. And I never really understood and appreciated that until a friend of mine got me into Kenny Omega, and I started seeing the Kenny Omega Okada matches. And the first one that I saw, I don't remember if it was round 1 or round 2 of that whole series of 4 or 5 matches, but I watched that match twice. I knew what the outcome was, who won and lost, before I even watched it the first time. And I still felt myself so invested and cheering and grimacing. And, when you add that deathmatch element to it, knowing what we know now as, I won't say elder, but wiser people, I think it makes you appreciate it.
For me, I wouldn't say wiser.
Yeah, there's times where I could definitely not say wiser, but knowing what we know now, being bigger fans of the sport, more appreciative, seeing the things that they have to put themselves through just as regular wrestlers, it makes you appreciate the art of the hardcore / death match even more. Yeah. So.
I totally echo everything you've just said there. If I'd have got into this wrestling when I was in my teens, early 20s, stuff like that, I probably wouldn't have appreciated the hell that these wrestlers put themselves through for entertainment. It's awe-inspiring almost that they are willing to sacrifice so much of their body to entertain a group of fans. It's really, really, I'm so much more appreciative of it now than I would have been some 20 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah, and even 20 years ago, we got tastes of it when we got TLC and TLC2 with the Hardys and Dudleys and Edge and Christian. But, what we've researched and watched since then, even stuff 20 and 30 years ago is that's the tip of the flipping iceberg. That's, not to negate the sacrifices that those 6 men, I had to count, that's horrible, 6 men did. But like, when you look at the larger picture of what hardcore and deathmatch wrestling is, it seems like child's play, even as dangerous and scary as it was, it's like, well.
Okay, so let's get into my first pick then. And I'm going straight to the top of the tree for mine, Atsushi Onita.
Oh, yeah.
So for people who don't know him, and I knew of him, but I'd never really kind of knew a lot of his backstory. He is essentially the father of hardcore wrestling. You get Terry Funk and Mick Foley, they're called hardcore legends, but for people in the know, Onita is the person who blazed that trail.
Oh, yeah.
He was actually a graduate of the All Japan Dojo. I think he was the first actual graduate. He was the ace of the junior division. But about a decade into his career, and after a broken leg, he was forced to retire. But the itch never went away. He wanted to still continue wrestling. 4 years later, he decided to make his return. Initially wanted to sign for the UWF, but they turned him away. So he did what a lot of wrestlers do, and he formed his own wrestling with blackjack and hookers. But he decided to form what became one of the most infamous promotions in deathmatch wrestling, Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, otherwise known as FMW. And their go-to match was the death match. They were just totally into this super hardcore style of wrestling. So they started with street fights, genuine martial arts fights, just standard death matches. I mean, it's weird saying a standard death match.
Right.
But Onita really kind of started to innovate in this kind of world of gruesome wrestling. He was the first person to have a barbed wire around the ring. He had several barbed wire rope matches. He invented the no rope explosive barbed wire match, kind of like the one we watched yesterday. In 1991, he had a series of matches against Mr. Pogo that included explosive landmines. In 1992, he upped the ante a little bit more when he started having Ring of Fire death matches. One especially infamous was when the ring and the whole arena basically set on fire within minutes, and that match got basically called a no contest because the wrestlers were being cooked alive almost. In 1993, he faced off against Mr. Pogo again in an electric bomb cage exploding ring time bomb death match. I mean, this guy was it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. In 1994, he lost a retirement match to his one of his longtime rivals, Tenryu, in an electric bomb cage match in front of 51,000 people for a hardcore death match. He didn't retire. In fact, he carried on wrestling for a full year and doing a retirement tour. That year, he had 164 matches, and the majority of them were some sort of hardcore or death match in a year. Dozens of no-rope matches, dozens of no-rope barbed wire street fight matches, double hell death matches, which were both standard and exploding, penalty box elimination death matches, a pool elimination death match, yen on a pole street fights, and then in his actual retirement match, he faced off against Hayabusa in an electric bomb cage exploding time bomb death match in front of 58,000 fans this time. Hayabusa would win that match, and Anita faded out of the picture for the time being. But wrestlers, and especially hardcore wrestlers, they don't tend to retire. And then over the next 25 years, Anita would still wrestle 395 matches in some form of a death match or another. And he's even wrestled 10 times in the current kind of pandemic era that we've had. And 8 of those have also been a death match. And just to kind of rubber stamp the point that this guy was a crazy bastard, he's got the record for the most amount of stitches needed after a wrestling match, when he needed 111 in a match against Masashi Aoge. And in his whole career, he's had 1,032 total stitches. So first pick, Anita, it had to be.
Yeah, it really did. Like, the man is all absolute, total, complete, 100% respect. He's a badass. There's just no other way to he's the ultimate badass, you know? And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have the enjoyment of some of these, even if it doesn't go full hardcore, you know, that some of the matches that we've had, the ideas for the matches that we've had, like, if it wasn't for him innovating that style and putting it out there, like the first time I had ever heard of him was Vice did a series about wrestling and wrestling around the world, and they covered Japanese wrestling. And I want to say they actually, that there's a store over in Japan that has like hundreds of memorabilia from Western wrestling, British wrestling, you know. I think we've seen it a couple of times in BTE episodes where they've gone in there, but someone found like the infamous kendo stick from the Onita match and bought it, and then went and met up with him at, oh God, what's the steakhouse? The super popular steakhouse that all the wrestlers go to, and they give them the jacket. I can't think of it right now.
Jimmy's? No, that's the seafood place, isn't it?
No, it's not Jimmy. It's in Japan. It's in Japan. I can't think of it right now, but he went and met him at that restaurant, showed him the stick, the kendo stick, and had him sign it.
Wow.
And like, he was like, just holding this in my hand right now just brings back so many memories. And I watched that like a little kid at a Disney movie. I was like, oh, this is awesome. You know, it was, oh God, it's, and, you know, when they're showing clips of everything, because they were talking about, you know, hardcore deathmatch wrestling as a whole. I think they talked to Ricky Shane Page and Sami Callihan.
Is it Ribera?
Yeah, Ribera. Yeah, they went and saw him at Ribera Steakhouse, and like, man, that whole series on Vice is just freaking phenomenal. Yeah. But I
mean, it shows his influence. We've just watched the first AEW kind of exploding barbed wire match, and he was in the crowd for the go home show of AEW for this pay-per-view. So his influence is being shown 30 years after he even decided to start being a hardcore wrestler. So yeah, it's I
mean, and if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have things like the Elimination Chamber matches, you know, which is usually something that I really enjoy, in some of the spots that we've gotten in those matches where people are falling through the top or the doors breaking in on the pod and all this other stuff. You know, we wouldn't have these type of things. So I had a feeling you were going to put him on there, and that's why I was like, no, I'm going to go a different direction. So you can't have this list. You can't even mention a hardcore deathmatch wrestling without mentioning him. So that's heck yeah.
Let's go to you then, Ori, for your second pick. Who gets that number 2 spot?
So mine are kind of all in no particular order, but I'm going to throw you for a loop on this one probably. Early 2000s, there was this TV show on this fairly new network, and it was a wrestling show, and I kind of liked it. And they tried to go up against WWE, but they failed. But they had a hardcore wrestler on there that I absolutely loved and appreciated, not only for his hardcore wrestling work, but for his regular character work, his work ethic, and just him all around as a person. And that would be Abyss. Mm-hmm. So, and I knew when I started saying it, like, you would kind of, I caught that grin, like yeah, I know where she's going with this. But like the Monsters Ball matches, you know, and Steel Chain Dog Collar match and Full Metal Mayhem, like, he helped innovate these matches for TNA. You know, he was also, I believe, in a Destination X match, which those were just freaking nuts. And so I can't, you know, like, Abyss is just, I don't know, like, I feel like he's what Kane would be if Kane went like full hardcore.
Yes, for me, he's always reminded me of a mix of Kane with the mentality of a Mick Foley.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, and even him doing his straight kind of,
Joseph Park
Esquire. Yeah, Mr. Joseph, where it's him, but it's not him. Like, that was just, it was brilliant.
Great, you know,
it was amazing. And I think as a wrestler in general, I think he is very underrated. You know, I think he definitely needs more credit where credit is due. You know, I think he's one of those people, just like AJ Styles and Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt and quite a few others, Eric Young and Motor City Machine Guns, that help build that show to what it was at its height.
Yeah.
You know?
So, and absolutely a great pick.
Yeah.
And I think now he's working as I want to say an agent or a producer for WWE. So it was obviously his talent was recognized. And for me, I like the fact that he brought that hardcore style to almost a prime time show. I think he's very, very underappreciated. I wouldn't say underrated so much, but I would definitely say very much underappreciated for what the kind of like the diversity he brought to TNA. Because at one point they had arguably the best wrestlers in the world in terms of talent. But you needed that kind of a palate cleanser, and Abyss certainly had that. And that's not to say he couldn't go in the ring. He absolutely could go. In standard matches, he was as agile a big man as you will get. But when he turned it up, and his love for thumbtacks is legendary. To put yourself through that is I have much respect to the guy.
Oh yeah.
So that's a great second pick. I'm going to continue down the Japanese trail for my second pick, and if we class Anita as the father of hardcore wrestling, then Mitsuhiro Matsunaga is, I would say, is the illegitimate son of hardcore wrestling. He was literally a couple of months into his wrestling training when he started taking part in death matches. He teamed up with a guy called Jerry Blayman in a losing effort to Anita and Tarzan Gato. But he kind of like kept in the standard wrestling mode for a while, doing the odd hardcore match. But it wasn't until like the late 1992 when he started to really kind of lean into death matches more. And Anita actually took him under his wing. He kind of like was looking at maybe having Matsunaga as his kind of apprentice almost. He was involved in an infamous hardcore kind of FMW storyline where there was a rival promotion called Wing, and they was in the same kind of vein as FMW, but unfortunately they couldn't compete in terms of drawing ability, and several of their talents ended up working for FMW, so they did a kind of almost an invasion storyline, and Matsunaga was heavily involved in that. But unfortunately Matsunaga and Anita kind of drifted apart, and he left the company to go and join another kind of a deathmatch-centric company in Big Japan. And it was here where Matsunaga kind of like realized he could also innovate in terms of death matches. So he took part in many of the no ropes barbed wire style matches, but he started bringing in things like barbed wire tables and barbed wire boards, even scaffolding. But he really cemented his hardcore legacy with a match that is widely considered to be the best hardcore death match in history. He faced a wrestler called Kendo Nagasaki in the Yokohama Amazon River Piranha death match. Now,
jeez. For
those who haven't watched this match, let me just kind of set the scene. You've got the standard hardcore deathmatch ring with barbed wire ropes, but in the middle you have a glass fish tank full of piranhas, essentially.
Oh, good Lord.
Now, the arena was absolutely packed. Everybody wanted to watch this match, and these two wrestled for 20 minutes with barbed wire tables, bats, everything barbed wired, and without actually entering the fish tank. But what they did was they kind of like bled into it. They kind of like teased the crowd, really kind of whipped the piranhas into a frenzy, because once they get the taste of blood, they get very, very excited. And the crowd as well, they were also whipped into a frenzy, really on tenterhooks. It's not often you see a hardcore crowd silent, and that was what was happening. Everybody was invested. Matsunaga ended up losing this match. He was pushed into the fish tank. His opponent, Kendo, put a board on top of the fish tank and then led on it so he couldn't get out.
Oh, my God. I have to go watch this. This is insane.
It's mental. It's honestly mental. It takes about 4 or 5 other wrestlers to come and prize Kendo from the board to get Matsunaga out of the piranhas. He's got huge chunks of his chest ripped out by the fish. It's absolutely mental. But it wasn't even finished there. You think that you've done that, that's the pinnacle. Oh, no. He certainly lived up to his Mr. Danger persona. He started championing using broken glass in matches. He pushed for light tubes, thumbtacks. He had barefoot thumbtack matches. He had matches called Firestone matches, barbed wire spider nets. But he then kind of went back to using nature because he had matches with scorpions and with alligators and crocodiles.
No, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. He actually retired in 2009, and he was one of the few hardcore wrestlers that stayed retired. And he runs a successful steakhouse franchise now, based off his character Mr. Danger. So yeah, if I'm going to have a neater on the list, I've got to have his apprentice Mitsuhiro Matsunaga.
That's crazy. Yeah, because I've watched a video of because when you're a kid and you watch TV shows, whether they're cartoons or whatever, you think quicksand is going to be a thing and piranhas is going to be a thing. You feel like you're going to encounter these things much more, as a grown-up than you ever do, which is usually never, And so, we were all afraid of piranhas. But, I've watched somebody with, a pet piranha tank, and he can stick his whole hand in there and it's like nothing, but you throw meat in that thing and they go nuts.
Yeah. Well, they're actually really timid animals. It's just there's something in the protein of blood that really kind of just
kicks them off. Yeah.
They rip the shreds out of Matsunaga. So yeah, go and see this match. I think it's on YouTube. So it's not hard to find, but yeah, the guy was a mental case. Well,
okay, but let's be honest. Anybody who does hardcore deathmatch wrestling, they're a little bit, and some of us who like it are kind of mental cases a little bit. I'm just speaking from personal experience.
I'm certainly not shaming, but it certainly opened my eyes watching two guys trying to essentially kill each other with piranhas.
Golly, that one's going to be on a playlist somewhere to watch later when I haven't eaten or, when the stomach can handle it, because I just have a feeling already. Oh, that's awesome, though.
It honestly really is. So let's refresh the palate and then go with your third pick.
Okay. You got to go with Mrs. Foley's baby boy. You got to put
third pick as well. My third pick as well.
You got to go with Mick Foley. I mean, not only did he take the time to go to Japan and learn and be a part of their culture where it all started, but he helped to bring it to America. Mm-hmm. I mean, for God's sakes, the man gave his ear, for hardcore deathmatch wrestling. Yep. And he's reinvented himself so many times, but still, whether he was Cactus Jack, whether he was Mankind, even if he was Dude Love, I think that love of hardcore and death matches and whatnot, that was there. That wasn't going anywhere. And you would catch elements of that no matter what character he portrayed. And now he's Santa Claus, but Santa Claus that could still probably kick your butt and, throw you into some barbed wire. And I would probably say, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Foley. I appreciate it.
So honestly, it's a perfect pick. And like I said, he's my third pick. For me, my first vision of hardcore wrestling was his match with Terry Funk, where they both were absolutely just, I mean, you hear the term crimson mask in wrestling. Mm-hmm. This was a crimson mask. You could not see his face because it was just covered in sticky, bright red blood. It was absolutely brutal. And that 1995 tournament, the King of the Death match, where it was basically a one night show where each match brought a new and kind of more deadly gimmick to the game. I think he faced Terry Gordy in the first round, which was a standard barbed wire baseball thumbtack match. Then in the second round, he faced Shoji Nakamami, which was a barbed wire board bed of nails match. I mean, bed of nails, yeah, that's just absolutely terrifying. And then in the final, the one I'm on about, the Terry Funk match, his best friend and his kayfabe nemesis. This was a barbed wire rope, exploding barbed wire boards, exploding ring time bomb match. The match is actually only 30 minutes. I thought it was a hell of a lot longer than that. And it's sometimes it's uncomfortable to watch, knowing what these two put themselves through. And these are two people who were best friends doing this to each other. It's brutal. After about 10 minutes...
But at the same time, some of that makes for some of the best stuff because you know each other so well, you trust each other, you're willing to push yourself a little bit farther. And so that, you know... Absolutely. Yeah, they can be, you know, best friends off to the side, but, you know, it in a weird way. It's like the... which is not going to be a hardcore death match, but you'll understand where I'm going with this. When we got the Young Bucks versus Kenny and Hangman, you know, having that type of camaraderie outside of the ring and working together for so long, you know, you trust these people because you have to when you're a wrestler. You have to trust your opponent with your life. You're taking your and their life into each other's hands. And so when you trust somebody on such a level, it allows you to push even farther than you normally would, I think. Now I can't, you know, neither one of us can completely speak to that because we aren't wrestlers. We've never trained. But, you know, I'd be willing to do a lot more death-defying stuff with my best friend than I would, you know, or my husband, than I would just somebody I went to high school with 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. I've just finished, before recording with you, I've just finished recording another podcast with Simon Powell called Chain Wrestling, and we watched over the Bret Hart and Owen Hart match from WrestleMania 10. And it kind of speaks to exactly what you've said. The best, you get the best out of somebody when you know them almost intimately. I mean, that match for me is so crisp and smooth. It's two guys who have wrestled each other from being toddlers, and you know they know how each person works inside and out, and kind of like the Hangman and Omega versus Young Bucks. These guys know each other. These have been best friends for such a long time. They know how far they can go with each other. Everyone knows each other's wrestling style, and it makes for a better match. And it links perfectly to what Terry and Mick were able to do with each other. They knew that if they were going to push it to the extremes, that there was nobody better in the ring to be with than each other. And they were the perfect foils for each other. And just going back to Mick, it was only about 8 months after this King of the Death match he ended up being in WWF. So that really must have, you can see how that influence brought him over to the West, and he brought that style with him. Obviously coming in as Mankind, but the stuff he did with Undertaker, the street fights he did with Triple H, the stuff with Randy Orton, all influenced because he was heavily involved in this hardcore scene with his best friend Terry Funk.
And I think that's kind of the thing that a lot of people who prefer traditional style wrestling overlook, is that you've got to get those fundamentals for, you know, traditional wrestling first before you can really throw yourself off a cage. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And there was one wrestler in particular who, for the sake of things, I will remain nameless, but people would get so hung up on the fact that he was a hardcore deathmatch wrestler that when they would see him wrestle, they'd be like, this guy can really wrestle. And it's like, yeah, like most of these guys, they really can, you know. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of backyard wrestlers who've done things in their house and they're doing things for grins and giggles and to make entertainment for their friends. And, you know, as long as you're not hurting anybody and nobody else is getting hurt, I'm perfectly okay with it. You know, it's your insurance, you know, or lack thereof. It's your medical bill. But most of these guys who are really into this hardcore deathmatch wrestling, they've taken the time not only to study professional wrestling as it is, you know, the classic style, Jim Cornette style, if we want to put it that way, but they've also put in the time to actually study it as an art and as a craft and to make those relationships to be able to do that, you know, put that level of trust into someone else, you know, and have that reciprocated.
Absolutely. So, seeing as we agreed on the third pick with Mick Foley, let's go into the one that rounds off your Mount Rushmore.
Ay, ay, ay. Okay, I have a feeling that your number 4 could, because I have like a list of 5.
Okay. And
I think your number 4 might be this one, so I'm going to go with the other one. So I'm going to say Al Snow.
Oh, it was not my number 4.
Which is why because I figured the other person would be, and you might throw me a swerve completely. But I loved Al Snow.
Before you get into Al Snow, just for context, who was the alternate?
Terry Funk.
Again, no, I didn't go for Terry Funk.
Well, I guess maybe since we had already kind of touched on Funk, because you can't really talk about Foley without talking about Funk. I mean, you could really stick them side by side on a Mount Rushmore. You know, without Funk, there's no Foley. Without Foley, there's no Funk. They really go hand in hand when it comes to hardcore deathmatch wrestling.
Absolutely. I mean, the only reason I didn't include Terry Funk was because he had such a long career and only a relatively kind of short period of it was actually hardcore wrestling. It was mainly a lot of standard wrestling, so that's why I kind of like separated him. But I totally agree with you. I think him and Mick go together like peas and carrots. They're inextricably linked, and you cannot mention one without mentioning the other. So I do agree with you that, but I didn't go with him on my list.
Well, and especially, you know, when you talk about wrestling in America, in Western culture, you know, bringing it ECW and that kind of thing. But yeah, I really like Al Snow. Al was just really fun to watch, especially with Head and everything. A matter of fact, I saw him in New Orleans when I was probably 22, 23. We had gone down to Bourbon Street just for grins and giggles, and he was there with a very nice lady whom I'm assuming is or was his wife. And he walked into a store and I grabbed my friend who was not a wrestling fan at all. And I kind of followed him for a minute. And I'm one of those people, like, when you're in the limelight so much, when you're off, you deserve the chance to be off.
Absolutely,
and so I kind of, should I, shouldn't I? And then I finally just left him alone. But in doing TikTok, I have actually become friends with a girl on TikTok who is Al Snow's adopted daughter. Her name is Jenny. And so, you know, I've gotten to talk to her and she tells wonderful stories about Al and whatnot. And so last night when we saw him on AEW, I was like, it didn't like, it wasn't it's Al Snow type of pop. It was like, it's Jenny's dad type of pop.
Oh, that is so cute.
Because that's where my brain went, you know, because I've been on TikTok way too much. But yeah, you know, I don't think it's not, let me try that again. It's not just his hardcore wrestling, like it's him as a person as well. I really loved the show Tough Enough when it initially came out. And to see, it was the first time I think we really got to break the fourth wall with wrestling, as it were, and kind of pull back the curtain and really take a look at things and to see these wrestlers as people. And he got, you know, as much as he gave those potential wrestlers, Josh Matthews kind of gave it back to him quite a bit during that show. And he really kind of took it on the chin and was kind of like, All right, kid. All right, kid. Your time's coming. All right. All right. And so, there was something about that I really appreciated. But, he was one of those that I just really, there was something about him. I just gravitated toward him. I enjoyed watching him work. I enjoyed, watching him be a person, And I think that seeing that kind of endeared him more to me and, led me to appreciate him and Hardcore. Because, once again, I was I didn't get into wrestling until early 2000. And so by then ECW was almost out. I'm in South Louisiana, so I had no idea what or where ECW was. And so until the invasion actually happened, I hadn't a clue. So it was one of those things that when he came along, it kind of pushed me to kind of look into it a little bit more, especially as I got older and started getting into the hardcore deathmatch scene more.
Yeah, I could wax lyrical about Al Snow. I think he's another so underappreciated talent, and the stuff he did with Head, the stuff he did with Steve Blackman. I mean, that tag team. I mean, it was only together for a few months, but it resonates so much. A Head cheese, and I remember the Mississippi River match he had with Bob Holly, where he was wrapped up in a fence. Yeah, it was such a good storyteller in hardcore wrestling. He even had a match against Too Cool. Him and Head were wrestling against Too Cool, and the ending to that just always makes me chuckle, because Too Cool get a bottle of Head and Shoulders and they attach it to Head so they can pin the Head by pinning the shoulders down. It's so good.
I've forgotten about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great pick, but it's not one that I considered. And again, like I said, I didn't go with Terry Funk, but I think you'll appreciate my last pick.
Okay.
I'm going with Sabu.
Yes.
Now,
I tossed Sabu around as well as Sandman, and I was like, there's so many good people who came out of ECW that it's really, I mean, Mick Foley's kind of the shoe-in. To me anyway. But there's so many other people. I mean, Devon and Bubba Ray Dudley. Yeah. There's a lot of people. Bob Holly. There's
just incredible.
So
Steve Carino.
Yeah, that Steve Blackman. So many people that could be thrown on this list that it gets kind of hard. Yeah.
So the reason I went with Sabu is one event that happened in ECW, and I'll get to that in a little bit. I just want to give a little bit of a history of Sabu and why he fell into hardcore wrestling. So everybody knows he's the nephew of the original Sheik, who was a pioneer in hardcore wrestling himself. He was the promoter of Big Japan, and he brought his nephew over to kind of learn that hardcore style, and Sabu then brought that to ECW and really kind of like paved the way for a lot of those wrestlers that we've just spoken about. But whilst he was in Japan, he worked for FMW as well, and he was involved in that infamous Ring of Fire match that I spoke about earlier. And he's actually said in an interview that the ring burned for 19 hours, and they couldn't put the fire out. But he made his way to the West, to ECW, that kind of uncontrollable madman gimmick where he was strapped to a gurney, really sold with those kind of alternate fans who wanted something different to WWE and WCW at the time. He became known for breaking tables, and there's many a match where he would intentionally just throw himself through a table because the table didn't break in the first place, and he wanted to make sure that table broke. But for me, the reason why he had to be on this list was Born to be Wired. He had a match that was promoted as Too Extreme for ECW, again facing Terry Funk, the hardcore legend. He was involved in what we would now call a standard barbed wire match after all the horrific stuff that we've watched.
Right.
But in the most infamous spot in this match, he attempted to do Air Sabu, which is like a splash into the corner. But Terry moved out of the way, and Sabu got tangled in the barbed wire, and it gave him a torn bicep and a 10-inch wide gash in his arm. You would think that would stop the match, but this is Sabu we're talking about. He absolutely did not stop. He shouted to Bill Alfonso, who was his manager, for some ring tape, taped the wound shut, and carried on wrestling. The end of that match actually came when both guys were so tangled in barbed wire that several people had to come with wire cutters just to get the two guys out and back to backstage. Paul Heyman has said in an interview that the match was so gruesome that he would never put one on again.
And that's saying something for Paul Heyman.
Absolutely. But this wasn't even the worst thing that happened with Sabu. He broke several ribs in a match against Cactus Jack. He's broken his jaw twice, once against Taz, and then another one in a table match against with a tag team title match with RED against Sandman and Tommy Dreamer. And if you get the chance, definitely go back and see this, because he attempts a triple moonsault, but it hits his mouth on the leg of an upturned table. It actually knocked several of his teeth out, obviously broke his jaw, and was inches away from severing his throat. It was that horrific. He's broken his neck twice. Once with Chris Benoit when he attempted to turn in midair to take a backdrop, and yet instead of kind of flapjacking out, he landed square on his head. And then the second time he was Tazplexed through a table. And this homicidal, genocidal maniac still wrestles now. Still doing the same kind of brutal style. It was very recently. He did a barbed wire board match. He's done no rope barbed wire matches, and he's done an amazingly titled. I mean, some of the matches have had great titles, but I think this is the best for me. It's a barbed wire, board and barricade, mats, scramble, bunkhouse, tornado, lumberjack, and certified weapons. Okay, and grossing 7 million yen contention deathmatch.
Good Lord. So much.
Yeah. So my final.
I'm tired just hearing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to spell it. That's for damn sure. It'd need a poster of its own just to explain it.
Right? Good grief.
So yeah, that's my final pick. Sabu. Two amazing and very different Mount Rushmores we've got there. I like the fact that you kept yours relatively tame as well, kind of like almost like a refresher for the horrific stuff that I had to go through to research this.
There's I mean, and that's the thing, once you start down that rabbit hole, it gets deep and it gets messy. It gets so messy, and ooh, I got the willies. Yeah, it can get kind of grody, and I can understand why some people just aren't into it. But when you start to really understand the psychology, when you start to really understand, how these guys train and how they put their bodies on the line, while you may not appreciate the aesthetics of it, and what happens during it, then you can at least appreciate what they do and what they put themselves through, because I'll be honest, if you watched AEW Revolution and watched Kenny versus Mox and that was too much for you, or even the previous Kenny versus Mox hardcore match, if that was too much, don't go research any of it.
Yeah, do not just go looking at this.
Do yourself a favor. Just listen to this and live on. Because once you get down that rabbit hole, you're going to find some stuff and you're going to be like, I'm sorry, what? You did what? With what? Oh, dear God.
But if that has kind of whet your appetite, definitely go and look up some of these matches, because these go hardcore in every sense of the word.
Oh, yeah. There's light hardcore. Like if I were to describe light hardcore, think WWE hardcore title belt early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of it, it probably gets, but I loved that because it was a good introduction to hardcore. Even the 24/7 title that they had recently, while that may not have had the hardcore element to it, it kind of had that same fun tongue in cheek, falls count anywhere, anytime, that kind of thing. But my brain just completely stopped. Wow. But yeah, it can, once you start down that rabbit hole, like I said, it can get gruesome, but there's you get to see people do some really cool things and live to tell about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ori, this has been absolutely amazing to catch up with you. It's been far too long, and let's make sure it's not as long next time. I think you're one of the best people that I've come into contact with over this madness that is wrestling social media. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with little old me.
Any day, anytime, my friend.
But let the Badlands listeners know where they can find you on social media and give them all those details. I
am Oriona75 on Twitter and on TikTok. If you're one of those people who likes TikTok, ORIONA75. And I'm actually Oriona7 on Twitch, if I can ever get that up and running. So basically, same lettering, same formation. No 5 because somebody already had it and I don't know how to get it away from them.
Wow. So somebody already had that.
Yeah. And they don't stream either. And so I may try and contact them and say, hi, can I have this because this is me everywhere else and I'd actually like to stream with it. Yeah, that's
really weird.
I thought the same thing.
Because no disrespect, it's not like a John Smith. Or like it's not something really common, so it's interesting that someone else has got that name.
I know. I might have to research it a little bit more, see if I could reach out to them on Twitch and see if I can get that account or whatever if they're not using it. Hopefully, I can. If that happens, they'll respond and I can maybe reclaim my name, sort of. So.
Either way, definitely go and follow Ori on all her social medias. I'll certainly be going to follow her on TikTok. I'm not a TikToker, but I follow a couple of friends on there just to give them props, and I'll certainly be following you on there. And if you do get your Twitch up and running, absolutely let me know, and I'll certainly be over there giving you a sub on there as well. But if you feel like following me, you can do on Twitter at DJ Kurtbear. I'm always involved in a wrestling argument or I'm getting blocked by somebody or other. Follow Paul at Rain Counter. Show him some love. Follow the show at Badlands Pod. Definitely follow the network at Chairshot Radio. Thank you all for listening, and that is the end.
Chairshot.com. Always use your head.